my channel, Where is Shay? And I'm in Oakland, California, and I have a special guest. Her name is Miss Bridget Wood, based out of Reno, Nevada. God just pretty much led me to her. I was just scrolling online looking for a dietitian, kept passing her up, and I guess God said no, keep swiping back up to her. So I reached out to her on Instagram. So this is part 2 of my weight loss journey. Part 1 was with my brother Jazz, a personal trainer, but I think it goes hand in hand with a person trying to lose some weight. But I'm gonna go ahead and let Miss Bridget introduce herself. Just let us know like a little bit about you, where you're based out of, things like that.
Great, thank you so much, Shay. So as Shay mentioned, I'm Bridget Wood. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist based here in Reno, Nevada. I'm also certified in diabetes care. So that's where the bulk of my patient and client population kind of reside, I guess. What else? Previously, I've had to work in a medically supervised weight loss clinic. I've worked in an outpatient diabetes facility and endocrinologist office as well. So I've done a couple of different things there, along with working at a virtual practice with another type 1 diabetic RD. So I also have type 1 diabetes myself. So
How long have you been in this industry?
I've been a dietitian for about 3 years now, so about 3 years. I've been working in nutrition since about 2016.
I never really just sought out a dietitian, and actually I never really even been given any advice from my doctor. I'm on the Kaiser plan out here in California, and all it was like, oh, here's all your blood work and you're pre-diabetic, but never like, well, these are the steps to start working on XYZ. So do we find dietitians like on our health insurance, or is it a private seeking kind of thing, or?
Yeah, so unfortunately, that is a very, very common story. The doctors don't always refer when they're supposed to. Typically, we'd like to refer at diagnosis of any of these, conditions like prediabetes, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, any of that. But a lot of times it kind of gets pushed away. So long story short, there's a combination of both. So there's dietitians in the hospital facilities, there's outpatient dietitians, there are private practice dietitians. Some of those dietitians don't take insurance and some of them do. So it kind of just depends. And I will also say that your allotment is going to depend on the condition that you're diagnosed with, but also your insurance plan as well. So that can kind of contribute to it. Mm-hmm.
So when a person is told like, hey, you're pre-diabetic, what would you suggest be the next steps? Because like I said, this was like 2 years ago, I'm still floating on the pre-diabetic thing. So I'm like, oh, I guess I just need to eat 2 less Snickers. I don't know.
Oh my goodness.
So I don't really know what.
Yeah, that is outrageous. Yeah, the first step is, if you are aware, you could always ask your doctor for a referral for a dietitian and go and see them within that hospital system plan if you'd want to try that. Or you could always seek out a dietitian online and see if they'd be able to coach you. There's also something called the Diabetes Prevention Program. So it's actually a program that they offer in several different, sites or hospitals around the nation that is actually meant for people who are newly diagnosed with prediabetes to help prevent them to not progress to type 2 diabetes. So what happens is they kind of go over different behavioral modifications, behavioral things, and then they kind of make those lifestyle changes so that we can avoid having that actual diagnosis.
So this is something that's reversible. I can scale it down and get back on a healthy track in my life.
Typically at the pre-diabetic stage, it is something that you can kind of get back on track with those lifestyle modifications, combination of the good old balanced eating, upping the physical activity. Sometimes doctors will preemptively put you on medication, but typically not at the pre-diabetic stage. You kind of like to see what you can do on your own before they kind of go that route. But it also depends on the provider. But when you're at the pre-diabetic stage, you absolutely can go backwards, similar to for some people living with type 2. Sometimes they can get to a point where they're in remission. So therefore, the type 2 diabetes, their blood sugars are normal as of somebody who does not have diabetes, but technically they're like in remission. So.
Okay. I know you work typically with people with diabetes, but are there different dietitians for like people with cancer or MS or things like that?
Yes, yes. So there's a lot of different specialties out there and different certifications. I actually do know of another Black dietitian. She works specifically with the cancer population. So we're out there. They do have dietitians that work with people with PCOS, with thyroid issues, with bariatric dietitians that help the people who are getting the weight loss surgery, pre-surgery, post-op, all that good stuff. Yeah. So there's a lot of different options out there. And typically also renal dietitians that specialize in kidney disease. So for those specialties, sometimes you do have to go out of like your hospital system or your location. So sometimes it might mean trying to find somebody online. But sometimes there are people just within the area who do have those certifications and that expertise. And then there's also general dietitians who kind of just do a little bit of everything. But if it progresses to a point where it's beyond their scope, then they likely would refer out to a specialist.
Okay. Well, like I said, nobody really ever speaks about it. I mean, I know, even with mental health, that's just starting to be something that the Black community is really talking about at this day and age and time. So I just liked it when I was just seeing Black dietitians matter too. I was like, I guess they matter too, huh? Because we always know to fry up a pork chop, a pork steak, and smother some stuff and soak it in some sugar and salt. And it's like, yeah, I can see, why the Black community has such a high, with heart disease and diabetes and things like that. So.
And it's not to say that like we can't eat our cultural foods, because I absolutely still eat red beans, boudin, but trust me, like it still happens. But it's just about the way that we do it and maybe changing things up a little bit to make it a little bit more nutritious. It's not to say that, because a lot of times people, when they're diagnosed with something like, well, I got to give up my collard greens, I got to give up my mustard greens, I'm going to eat kale. It's the same thing. It's all in the preparation and how we're making it, and that really makes a difference.
Yeah, soaking it in the hog mogs and all that.
Right. It's delicious.
I get it. The little substitution swaps. Right. Okay. Let me see what else. I guess, is there any health tips that you would give to me? Like, I'm a sweet tooth person, so I still want to be able to go on this healthy journey, but also like, hey, I might, women, we crave our things, around our menstrual cycles and things like that. So that's like being pregnant for a week. But I'm like, I want my ice cream and my pickle at the same damn time. So how do you balance trying to get on this weight loss journey of a healthy start, but still sometimes needing those craving fixes as well?
Yeah, and it is going to vary from person to person, because I've had clients where they are just simply triggered by those foods, and at the beginning of their journey, it's not going to be as beneficial to them because it kind of brings up some of that disordered eating that might have been kind of established in the past with other like fad diets or yo-yo diets or anything like that. So sometimes I'll say we can wait to reintroduce those types of things until we get to a point where we're comfortable. But for other people who feel like they have like the willpower, for me, if somebody sat like a whole box of Krispy Kreme in front of me, I'd probably eat the whole box. And so it's like things like that, so I'd probably avoid it. But if you do have the willpower, just realizing that at its very core, it is still food, it is still nourishment, but just realize that, I think a lot of times what we do is we put too many labels on food saying that it's good, it's bad, or, we restrict. And then in the mind, we're like, well, it's something bad. I feel like I'm doing something naughty. And so it can either trigger emotions where you're like, I got to eat this now because I'm not getting it again, or so on and so forth. So really just a little bit at a time, maybe, kind of look at the bigger picture of your meal. Maybe you have it as a little sweet treat with like a salad or like something with protein, with a lot of fiber, all that good stuff, something that's really nourishing and nutritious. And then you can have the soul nourishing food too, ever so often, so that you don't feel like restricting yourself and missing out, I guess.
So how does the whole I did take like a little food preparation class that Kaiser was offering one night. And it was talking about a lot about label reading on like the back of bottles and cans and stuff. So how do you feel about that?
And again, so I personally will look at the label. I won't use it as like Bible or anything like that, but I'll look at it as a guide because I do need it for like carb counting for my diabetes. But in terms of the label, it can be overwhelming at first. So I always try to tell clients to take one thing at a time that you're focusing on. So if you do have issues with like blood pressure or something like that, maybe look at the sodium, start with that. And oops, sorry, my dog is making an appearance. So if you look at the percentages, it actually kind of gives us a guideline. So anything that's 5% or less is very low in that nutrient. 10% is about moderate, and 20% or higher is super high in that nutrient. So for some things, you know, when it comes to like fiber is good for the heart. It's good for weight loss or weight management because it can help fill you up. You want it to be on the higher side. You're not going to get 20% because that's a lot of fiber and you'll be in the bathroom all day. But you want it to be on the higher side, like, you know, 3 grams or more would be beneficial. On the other hand, we have things like sodium. So you want to be mindful of that. So if it's like 20% or higher, or like 48% of your daily value, then that's a lot of sodium. So I tend to tell people either, you know, maybe hold off or maybe just adjust the amount that you're having, you know, especially if it's something that's like, you know, the whole thing is going to be 58%, maybe just have half and then pair it with, you know, like a non-starchy veggie if you want to, or a piece of fruit or something that will help balance everything. And then make sure you drink water and fluids.
Right. How do you feel about like detoxing and things like that?
So for me, I personally, as a dietitian, since it isn't evidence-based, I can't really recommend it. I know a lot of people do it. They like it. They have success. You know, our liver does a good job of like detoxing any of the toxins that we have. But I will, you know, so for me, it's not something I typically recommend for clients. But, you know, it's hard for me to say either way. There's no literature, there's no studies out there for me to see either way. But I do know what the liver can do. So that's why I'm kind of like, well, you know, it kind of just is going to depend on the client, depend on the person. And we want to be careful because sometimes for some people that can lead to, again, like disordered eating or issues with their relationship with food. So.
Yeah, because I think before I even reached out to you, it was like, okay, I'm going to start this, and just started seeing so many advertisements on social media. I was like, let me order that and let me send that in. And it's like, my first video that I just put up is just like, everything was just everywhere on the table. Like, okay, it's sports bras over here. We got some yoga pants right here. We got a shake. We got a detox. We got this. We got gummies. And it's like, oh, damn. And then it was like, oh, now I met Bridget. So.
And it could be a lot, and that's part of it too. Like when you do those detoxes or like those smoothie cleanses or juice cleanses, it's going from like 0 to like 1,000. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like you're not going slow. So like typically when you do stuff like that, we're not leading to sustainable changes. But I will say for some people, they do it and they're fine. It really just kind of depends on the person. But yeah, long story short.
The one that I did get in is by Bougie Hippie, and it came with like a little fat burner, some apple cider vinegar gummies, and then the detox pill at night. And but I like that it came with a meal plan, so it was a healthy meal plan, and I was like, okay, this is working. But I'm a person that still likes to travel. I still like to embrace the culture wherever I'm at. So any advice for me being that good old foodie person, but how do you, because I'm going back home to Houston next weekend. So when they say everything is big in Texas, they don't be playing with their portions. So
no, they don't. So I'm actually originally from Katy, from the Houston area. So I definitely do know. And I actually just saw on Instagram a reel that Frenchie's Chicken posted, and I was like, oh my God, like, so anyway, back to the question. So it really is all about the balance. So people use the term cheat meal, and I don't like to use that because again, it kind of puts those restrictions. But when you think about it, when you're traveling. Typically, most people are getting more movement. They're getting more things, more activity in. So sometimes that can counteract things, but you really just have to look at the bigger picture. Like, people will say you don't want to do too much of a good thing, or too much of a bad thing can be a bad thing. So it's really going to be about the balance. So you want to make sure that you're still enjoying yourself, but maybe it's like, I'll split this with my friend, my significant other, whomever, maybe so that you're still getting some of that food that you want, and you're enjoying yourself and not restricting yourself. Or maybe you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this for a meal, and then maybe I'll pick one thing. Maybe I'll go to the turkey leg cut and split that with somebody or something. So yes, so Papados, whatever you want, but go ahead. And it's going to be all about moderation, right? And that's the key. And most people are like, well, what is moderation? And it's like, well, if you feel like you're going throughout the day and most of your meals are just like, those foods that are not going to have that typical balance, maybe it's, maybe it might be time, or, safe to kind of add something in with a little bit of protein, a little bit of fiber, a little bit of non-starchy veggies, something to kind of nourish your body and make sure you're staying hydrated and all that good stuff. But the real key is to still be able to enjoy yourself, because life is so short, and you don't want to like place those restrictions around food and then think back to the memory, and all you can think about is like, man, I really wish I would have done X, Y, or Z. So, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you go by that? I've seen it on certain things, but it's like a plate that has the divided, like this much meat and this much vegetables, and
right.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, so that's the plate planning method, and that's typically where I like to steer a lot of my clients initially. Now, it's not to say that your meals are always going to look like that, and they're absolutely not going to look segmented like that all the time. Sometimes it might be something like a pasta salad, and you have like some zucchini cut up with a little bit of feta cheese and some pasta and maybe a chicken breast that also has the same components. It's just kind of revisioned and kind of mixed up. So I think that's a really good starting point. The plate planning method, or my plate method, is the other method for the general population, because it can help you kind of exercise that balanced meal planning to really get the perfect combination of all those nutrients, to make sure that your body is kind of, working as efficiently as it can. And not to say that it's not, if it's not in that balance, but it is going to help kind of create that perfect storm of nutrition. So I always say it's a good place to start, especially because, sometimes people think that they have to jump straight into counting macros or like weighing things, and that's not going to work for everybody. And that can be either a starting point for those people who do want to go to that journey and start doing that, or it can be like the forever point, because you might not want to do all those things or really put that much energy into it. So
now, when it comes to like, I guess, substitutions, what do they say? Like avocado is nature's mayonnaise, but no, sometimes I want some damn Miracle Whip, for real, for real.
I mean, yeah, like seriously. So, and that's understandable. So it is really gonna depend on the amount that you're having. It really is, like, and if you are one of those people who are like, I don't really like avocados, I don't really do that, you don't have to have avocado. Maybe look at where you're at today and the amount of Miracle Whip or mayonnaise or whatever you're doing, maybe scale it back. Maybe look for an alternative one that's going to have a little bit less of the fat that you're looking for, trying to avoid, or calories, or so on and so forth. And that way, you can still enjoy those things without feeling like you have to start eating foods that you don't care for. I always use the kale, because a lot of times people think they have to eat kale. I like it, but a lot of people don't. But it also has to be seasoned, right? Because I think sometimes people don't. So that's part of it too. So I would say moderation. Make sure you're still seasoning your food. And
speaking of seasoning, what are the no seasoning? Like, I always, like with people in the casket with their little flowers, so that's gonna be me with my little salt shaker, because I'd be like, they're like, you ain't even tasted yet. I'm like, nah, I just gotta put it on there. I gotta see that I put it on there. But I'm like, okay, Shay, this salt is gonna be the death of you, girl.
I will say sodium is the biggest Well, I don't know how to say it. It's basically one of the things that people don't realize how much salt is in something. Because salt can, they call it the silent killer with high blood pressure, right? So that is something I would say is the most important thing that you want to be mindful of. So again, it's not saying that you can't have salt. You do want to just be mindful of the amount that you're having. It's just to, scale it back. Maybe, for this example, maybe not, throw the shaker on, maybe taste it first, see how it goes. And then your taste buds do adjust. So with the other seasonings, they're pretty much freebies, things like garlic powder, onion powder, cayenne, paprika, all of that stuff. They're not really going to cause any issues, with the exception of things like turmeric or anything that could have like a blood thinning property if you are on any blood thinners or anything like that. But typically they're going to be okay. And so you can add more flavor that way, or even like fresh herbs and all that type of stuff. And dried or fresh, same kind of situation. It's not going to be a thing. Salt is going to be the biggest thing. I will also say that no matter the type of salt, it is still going to have pretty much the same amount of sodium. So if it's like Himalayan pink salt, black salt, whatever, it's still going to have the sodium in there.
I was about to just ask you about that, because I've seen the pink Himalayan. I'm like, I don't know. Let me get the old school one. And
the iodides, yeah. So they're gonna have the same sodium pretty much. The actual textures or the size of the salt might vary, or whatever minerals might be in there sometimes might vary, but the salt itself is going to be pretty much the same, have the same impact.
Okay. Oh Lord, that's like, I'm like really bad with it. Like I got salt packets in the car, salt packets in my purse, because if I go travel and they forget to give me my salt, now I'm in the room and it's just like I sometimes will not eat if I don't have no salt. Like I'm not eating it. So I've been experimenting with the Mrs. Dash brand.
Yeah,
hasn't been too bad, but
yes, Mrs. Dash is perfect. That type of stuff is good. Or even just doing less salt, honestly. I still use salt, but I just do a little bit less. Because if I don't have enough salt, it'll ruin the meal and my day. So I get it. I don't like bland food.
So when it comes to like breads and pastas, and like I see like wheat tortillas and wheat pasta, even just making a sandwich, is it like, should I just use one piece instead of a two sandwich bread thing, or whatever I'm trying to say, two breads for a sandwich?
So, and that is one method. There's so many different ways that you can attack that. So you can always do, reducing the portion size, especially when it comes to prediabetes and diabetes, to reduce the amount of carbohydrate, diabetes type 2. Or you can even look at the wheat breads, or like the whole grain breads. The thing that they have is the increased amount of fiber. And so by doing that, that is actually going to slow down the way that your food is digested. And so that actually slows down the blood sugar or glucose response after meals. So then your blood sugars are much more stable. It helps us stabilize things. So that's kind of why doctors, or the population, will say no white food. You can still have like white bread, obviously, but the reason why they say that is because it's an easy way for you to get like more fiber in to help ensure that the meal is going to be digested properly. Now, some people don't really care for the wheat breads or the keto breads or like the high fiber breads, which is understandable. And so it would just be it's definitely understandable. It would just be kind of reimagining that. So what can I take out of that place of the fiber in the bread and adding that to my meal? So it might be like veggie sticks, or it might be maybe you do that avocado instead of the mayo as like a healthy fat to help sustain you. Maybe you make sure you're doing like a lean turkey with the bread. Maybe you're doing a salad or anything of the sort like that has the fiber and or healthy fat combination that'll help to keep your blood sugar stable.
What do you think about the whole dairy products? Is there any that should be eliminated out of the equation, or scale it down, like brown eggs versus white eggs, or 2% versus almond milk? And because it's just like, it just seems like it's just overwhelming now to go to the store. Like, I don't know. Just give me some Kool-Aid.
I will say it is going to depend. That is going to vary from person to person. So for me, I don't really do much dairy because, one, I definitely grew up not being able to tolerate dairy, and there was just one point where I was like, I'm just gonna eat it anyway, and I really shouldn't have. So I finally accepted the fact that dairy and me don't get along, but also because I have Hashimoto's. And so for me, I don't really do it as much, but it's going to depend on the person. Some people might choose the dairy, especially if they have any gut intolerance or anything like that. They might not choose it and do like nut milks or something like that. The thing that I would be cognizant of is that if you do choose to try or use any of those plant-based milks, do look at those. That would be a good time to compare the labels, because sometimes if you get like one of the sweetened ones or anything like that, you might be having a higher amount of calories, higher amount of carbohydrates, added sugar, which is not present in cow's milk. So you might notice that you might be better off with the dairy milk if you're tolerating it. And kind of going back to like the 2% whole milk, all that good stuff. I keep freezing, I'm so sorry, but the 2% is going to be, technically lower fat than the whole milk, and as a result we're going to have less amount of calories, so less amount of calories, less amount of fat. When it comes to the carbohydrates in milk, it's typically going to be the same in the cow's milk, unless you're choosing something like a Fairlife or Dairy Gold has one too. It's like a fit milk that is going to have lower carbohydrate in those as well. And then to kind of also talk about the eggs actually, so
my brother's joining us.
Hi. The eggs actually are going to be different colors depending on the feed that the hen or the chickens have. Yeah. So they're pretty much the same. Hi, they're the same, but in terms of like, they'll say like the pasture raised or like the free range eggs, they do typically have a slightly higher amount of omega-3 concentration in them, so that is also a little bit of a benefit there. They have a little bit more nutrients than the the regular I guess white eggs. So.
Oh, I did not know. I be seeing like gray eggs and brown, and I didn't know what the hell was going on, but now I know. Well, everybody, my brother Jazz just joining in. Jazz is Miss Bridget. She's a dietitian based in Reno, and Jazz is based in Atlanta, Georgia. So these two lovely people are helping me on my weight loss journey, and I think it goes hand in hand. So they're about to collaborate on what's best for Shay's journey right now. So go ahead, Jazz.